Hey everyone, we'd like to welcome you back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website address is theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Today we have Charlie Spino from Clinical Site Services. Charlie he works in the industry. He's got lots of experience when it comes to patient recruitment in clinical trials. He's got lots of stories to tell us about the industry, about the state of patient recruitment, about how patient recruitment has evolved over the years to today in 2012 when you guys will be watching this. How we can use social media and the internet and things like that to better patient recruitment. And it's going to be a lot of excellent advice and excellent expertise and excellent feedback we're going to get from Charlie, especially for those of you guys who are working in the industry. And Charlie's going to tell you a little bit about his company and what they do and how they kind of fit into this space. So before we get started, Charlie, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks, Dan and Don. Appreciate it. Been following your guys' interviews and really impressed with the clinicaltrialguru.com as well. You have an extensive following, so again, I appreciate the time.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming on. And before we get into clinical site services, just tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started in this space, and kind of walk us through today and your involvement with clinical site services?
Yeah, I definitely will. I'll bring you way back. Actually, right out of college, I was a special education teacher working with emotionally disturbed kids. So dealt with a lot of kids that were on multiple medications, antipsychotics, and so on. And due to wanting to increase a wage, had transitioned out and went into pharmaceutical sales, and was in-house doing pharmaceutical sales training and also marketing. From there, I went into patient recruitment and retention with a group that's no longer in existence called Pharmaceutical Research Plus, PRP, located here in Maryland. And for the past 7 years, for 7 years was with United Biosource Corporation, working within the late phase of clinical trials, phase 3B4, and risk management. And after that was acquired from Medco, came back and wanted to get back into patient recruitment because it's always been a passion of mine, and rejoined some former colleagues from PRP, the founder, Chris Trisna, and also co-founder, Dinar Don, and have been here for 14 months, and really looking forward to bringing the model that they built from some of the lessons learned through our experiences from more of a centralized advertising agency, if you will, recruitment strategy. So that's really been that is really about 20 years of experience.
Right.
And that just brings me here to clinical site services today.
Now, when it comes to patient recruitment in clinical trials, let's just start at the very basic premise. The idea is that the sponsors choose investigators who have a large patient population of their own to enroll in the studies. So, in theory, there should not be a problem with recruitment in clinical trials. But we all know that's not true. That's why companies like yours exist. That's why, well, I don't know if that's the only reason why the Guru is, somewhat popular, but it's one of the reasons. Some of the advice, especially from Don, on patient recruitment. So where's the disconnect between in theory and then in reality with clinical trial patient recruitment?
I really break it up, and I have my own opinions on this, but I think there's some things that you can change and things that you can't change. And one thing that really comes down to reasons for enrollment challenges or slowing of enrollment timelines is these protocols are difficult. Now, getting a sponsor to change their protocol is almost impossible because they're being requested these, in my opinion, unrealistic patient populations that really don't exist in the real world. And they're being asked to find these patients. These patients could be your, I guess, normal BMI type 2 diabetic patient that doesn't smoke, that doesn't have any at-risk risk factors for coronary artery disease, and they don't have a family history. Last time I checked, that really covers a big population in the real world. They could be a CNS patient that is on multiple medications. So again, those are things I think that the sponsors and CROs, they really can't change or affect because they're being held to these expectations by the regulatory authorities. Things that can change is that the feasibility process, and both you know this, is that it's been really a process that has been done with a simple feasibility questionnaire, whether it's emailed or blasted out via fax. And I wish I had that type of request for information when I was applying for a home loan, because I could say, well, I have a salary of this much annual income, and there's really not that much due diligence. It's really, you're going off of the last clinical trial that the site has worked on, or a best guess for the protocol feasibility. So I think that's really a process that can be changed. The other thing is that study coordinators within sites, as both of you well know this, they're small businesses, and they're there to make a profit, and increasing the margins is part of the business plan, but they're working on competing trials. So these small businesses are being, when I say the resources, the study coordinator, they are, for example, in many of the sites that we work with, they are one FTE, but that one person is responsible for 15 to sometimes upwards of 30 to 45 studies. So they can't really devote the time and effort necessary to really go through and stick with an enrollment plan. That's how our organization was founded. So I think there's more support that's needed at the site, because the resources and the burden at the site is incredible. I think today the competitive nature of clinical trials is at a point where it's almost at the tipping point. A lot of studies are going overseas, but again, going back, there's things that you can't change in terms of these protocols. That's my opinion.
Yeah, you hit on a good point too about the coordinator. What I found in the past too, some sites expect coordinators to go out there and participate in enrollment, and I find that there are some personalities that just do not have that about them to be able to go out and do that. I mean, it's like saying that everyone can do sales. No, not everybody can be a salesperson. There's personalities for different roles in life. And I find a lot of coordinators just don't fit that. They don't fit the bill, and when they're forced to do it, they do it with a lot of reticence, and from that perspective, they're never successful at it.
You bring up an awesome point. I can bring up an example. We've worked with a site client. And I'll get into our business model, but we worked with a site client where they had a study coordinator who done exactly that was the profile of the study coordinator, and meaning that it was more of an introverted person when presenting the protocol to the patient. Mm-hmm. We're doing the little things, looking down at the ground, not looking at the patient in the eye, and again, doing this on stage is pretty weird too. So I'm trying to look at you and the camera at the same time. But those little things count, and when you're presenting a protocol, you're really presenting what is. When I talk to a sponsor or a CRO, because both of those are main customers of ours, my first question back to them is, why would I, as a parent or a caregiver, apologize for that. Why would I want to enroll into your trial?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the risks, tell me the benefits. If I'm a caregiver, why would I want to enroll my son or daughter? I have three
Right.
kids now, one of which actually is in a clinical trial for a dermatology for hemangioma. And then as you'll know this too, Don, because I think the last time we spoke, you did a lot of community outreach. And
Right. Mm-hmm.
why would I, as a physician, want to refer one of my patients that I have a relationship with into your clinical trial?
Mm-hmm.
So I always want to begin the dialogue that way. And again, it comes down to the personnel and their skill sets, and then also they just don't have enough time in the day. I can tell you some of the things that we're doing on behalf of sites in some of our multi-site programs, where we're working for a sponsor or CRO, and even our individual site clients. Some things come as, the arduous administrative duties of just logging, doing reports on behalf of the site to free them up to go screen more patients.
Mm-hmm.
The phone calls on behalf of the site. It's incredible. Those little things add up. We talked about the little things that could help a clinical trial, but there's little things that can actually hamper a trial too when they add up.
Yeah, now, we know that in clinical trials, we just finished an interview with a study participant and a research site director at their clinic, so they were both nice enough to come on. And I asked every study participant this, and I asked her the same thing. I said, what did you think of clinical trials before you entered? And she's first word she said was guinea pig. And it seems like that's consistent throughout my questioning. I mean, I don't know if there's it's obviously a misconception, but I don't know why we haven't been able to kind of break it down and explain it to people that, that's a myth. You're not a guinea pig in a clinical trial. So it's kind of like we're already starting from behind when it comes to patient recruitment, because the general public's they have a misconception of clinical trials to begin with. So a company like yours would come in, you guys are the communication guys who are supposed to spread this message out. What have been some of your challenges in regards to that?
Well, I mean, that brings up a good point. I mean, especially if you're looking at some of the, I don't want to say minority populations, because again, they're not the minority now, they're the majority. Mm-hmm. You have the things that happened back in the 40s and 50s, mm-hmm. Earlier with Tuskegee. A great book I would recommend would be The Incredible Journey of Henrietta Lacks as well, which talks about her cells and the vantage point of Johns Hopkins from her family. Incredible book. You hit on one thing, Dan, is it's awareness. They're not really aware of clinical trials, and they have a skewed perception because I think a lot of it has to do, and not a negative ignorance, they just don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. It behooves us, meaning sponsors, CROs, companies like ourselves, companies mm-hmm. like your group, to really go out there and educate. So with a lot of our programs, we like to add that component because while you may not be able to track it too well in metrics in generating interest, it can help out in the bottom end of what we call an enrollment funnel. Mm-hmm. When that person gets to the site and they understand what a clinical trial is and some of the literature that we've put together, Kenneth Getz and his group as well has put some incredible materials about the journey of a patient through clinical trials. I think at that point it helps with that screen fail rate, if you will, because now they feel more comfortable, because now they feel like they're contributing to the overall advancement of research. They may be a patient that has run out of options. I can give an example. A very good friend of mine, his mother has stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer with a mutation at the exon, I think it's EGRF or EGFR. She's resistant to standard of treatment, Tarceva. So what has happened is through the resources I've had with my group, and just like you, I don't have as large as a community like you in terms of Twitter, but also within LinkedIn, and going and knowing the resources out there like clinicaltrials.gov, was able to, with the help of some of my competitors, one being Lonnie Hashimoto, who's an incredible person within this industry. We actually located a clinical trial that she actually is traveling from southern Georgia to Vanderbilt, and it's another option. Now, will it help her? Who knows? But I can tell you for the last 2 weeks, someone that has been so depressed, this is another option. It's another opportunity to walk down to. So there's really small victories within clinical trials, and I think it really comes down to raising awareness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, there's been a lot of mishap. We have HIPAA now, and there's a reason for that. There was a study at Johns Hopkins, there was a study at the University of Pennsylvania, and there's a reason why HIPAA is such a big deal, and it has to be. And the HIPAA was even needed back in the times of Henrietta Lacks as well, in protecting that patient's information, but also the informed consent process.
Now, has that impacted you guys as far as recruiting online? Dealing with HIPAA?
We're seeing some great results. As a sequel to this, I can bring in some of my folks. We have Jennifer Whitlock, who heads up our media department here, and also includes, we have a digital media group that does all the placement and buying on Facebook and Google on behalf of sites and for sponsors and CROs with multi-sites. We're seeing, and it makes me smile too, social media, we're seeing a lot of traction within internet-based advertising. The reason I push back it that way is because, and this again is my opinion, is that within social media, when you have someone talking about a clinical trial in a blog or a forum, that always, and this comes from my days of working within risk management, it opens up the window, if you will, unless you monitor, and it costs money to monitor, and you have to keep on board and focus within blogs. If there's a question about, a clinical trial, or maybe even a statement about, well, I've been getting, headaches with this, that's a possible AE. That now it's changed in from patient recruitment to we have to find this person and follow them up. Mm-hmm. That's the responsibility as per the guidance within the FDA. We're seeing a lot of, to answer your question, Down, we're seeing a lot of good traction with internet-based recruitment, especially in CNS, major depressive disorder. We're seeing some good results within oncology. That's been one that we've been trying to unlock. How can we boost enrollment for cancer trials? Caregivers are using it as well for their patients within schizophrenia or Alzheimer's. So it's really starting to exceed some of the results that we've seen with more traditional, print advertisement and sometimes radio as well. And that's something we're doing on a global basis. So we're doing it in over 37 countries.
Now, does your group, Charlie, as we wrap up here, does your group work directly with the research sites, or do you guys work more with the sponsors and the CROs?
That's an awesome question. So the founders of this group, and I used to work at a centralized patient recruitment firm, and that's where we would turn on heavy media, depending on the therapeutic area, and really turn on the fire hose, if you will, with hundreds of referrals to the site. But what we found was, while you're turning on the fire hose for all these sites, they can only really handle, because of the resources, a garden hose, if you will. So what Chris did about 10 years ago was say, okay, he got a call from a site that said, we want all the things that you did for this last campaign for us. It was an irritable bowel syndrome program. and we would like to do it, and we'll pay for it with our site stipend. Well, back then the site stipends were a little bit more, and that's another reason for
Absolutely.
slow enrollment. They've actually decreased in these days, where sites will get maybe between $3,000 to $5,000 to place their own enrollment or advertising. And the harsh reality is they couldn't afford the services that we were providing to sponsors directly. So what we have done and what Chris has done is really focused not only on just media, but on site performance. How can we build an enrollment plan and help the sites engage and keep the study top of mind to look for the patients that are in and out of their office, that are in their database, and then step it up with their own unique individualized enrollment plan. And we're able to do that for sites. Now that's 6 years ago that we were able to do that. We have about 410 site clients where we will work with on an individual basis. We're also, what has happened in the last 2 years is now sponsors are coming to us and CROs, especially now with CROs having a lot of the responsibility now, saying, we've noticed that you have worked with a number of our sites. Can you take that model and do more of a quote unquote centralized model? And we always can. And it's more of a nomenclature is that we're doing site specific patient recruitment and retention plans, enrollment plans, and we're decentralizing it, hence the sites. But we're able to give our CRO and sponsor clients the ability to essentially monitor and make informed decisions moving forward. So that's to answer your question. We serve those three customers, and we're doing it on a global basis.
And we'll have the link to the website up there in case the research clinic wants to get a hold of you guys, and we'll also have your Twitter on there. Don, anything else you'd like to ask Charlie?
No, I mean, I think we could probably get into a couple hour long conversation about recruiting because there's so many different aspects to it.
Which we have, by the way, for those of you watching.
Yeah, because like I said, I've spent so much of my time in the past 20 years doing a lot of community outreach, both not just in research, about half that time in research, the other half working for hospitals. And there's so many different things that come out of it. A lot of people I find in this industry still have no understanding of how it works.
Yeah.
How does recruitment work? And it's a strange animal in itself, and you really have to step back and get a full understanding of it before you actually approach it.
It's true. I mean, there's a couple things. We were doing so much work with clinical trial recruitment, or patient enrollment, if you will, that a lot of our sites came to us and said, can you find us trials? So we built a network of sites that you and I and Dan are going to discuss moving forward, potentially, that they routinely ask us for clinical trials to come in. So we offer, at no cost at this point, feasibility at sites that we've actually worked with and been on the ground with. The biggest thing, to your point, Don, is getting sites to understand that what we're doing is we're going to help them find more patients. We'll help them get more site budgets for their enrollment effort, because the enrollment plans we put in place are then funneled through the CRO and or sponsor for approval. From the CRO perspective, we're able to get and the sponsor perspective, we're able to have those contingency plans up front, so you don't need to have a huge multi-million-dollar quote-unquote centralized program that many sites will opt out of because they feel they lose control. We're able to do that earlier on and provide that centralized approach, but at a decentralized model at the site.
Now, Charlie, very last question. We have a lot of research clinics out there watching, and I know what they're thinking because we get questions all the time through email, Twitter, all that stuff. They're saying, all right, I hear all this stuff. This is good for long term, but what should I do right now? I have this one study. It's very hard to enroll. You know, what's the one piece of advice you can give them besides calling you guys up, because that would solve their problems? But what's the one bit of advice you would give them? A site having a hard time enrolling for one particular study.
I would think the first thing, if they're working with a CRO or a sponsor, is to actively reach out to find out what other sites are doing. CROs and sponsors are doing a very good job, I think, at that, to kind of share best practices. There's a lot of information on the web out there, on best practices out there. There's a lot of good white papers. I think is really to step back, look at the protocol again, and really understand it's not just media, it's really the execution. Just take a step back and look at the protocol and put yourself in that patient's position, profile and shoes, if you will, because no one knows their patient better than a site and an investigator. And to ask those questions. That would be my recommendation, without spending any money, and also tap into your CRA, because your CRA is going to be a valuable resource. CRAs, at the end of the day, I'll talk to sponsors and CROs, and they'll say, well, that's great, but we're going to have our CRA focus on patient recruitment. Well, I can tell you from my experience that CRAs mostly spend their time looking at source doc verification, whether the site's, looking at the cleanliness of data, and when they're out of the site, they're on to the next site, and then when they're out of that site, they're usually on a plane, feverishly trying to get their trip reports done. So it's another time. So ask them, because in most cases, they're not really going to ask you. So be proactive with your CRA.
Excellent advice there. Charlie Spino, thank you very much for coming on, and stay on the line. We're going to talk off the air, so to speak. And Don, anything else, or you're good right now?
I'm good.
Thank you, Charlie Spino from Clinical Site Services. We'll have links on there. What's your Twitter handle?
Well, actually, I have a personal Twitter. It's called RX Trial Finder.
Okay. We'll put that on there, too. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and thank you for the excellent advice for the research clinics out there when it comes to patient recruitment. Definitely check out Charlie's company and reach out to him and let them know that you saw it on our show. This is Dan and Don from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.